Have you ever bought a seedling? How much did you pay? $20, $30, $50 for an avocado or lemon tree. What if I told you that the seedling you took home in a little plastic bag was made exactly the same way I am going to teach you right now, that it cost almost nothing to produce, and that you could have done it yourself at home without spending a single cent? Stick around, because what you are going to see in the next few minutes is some of the most practical and valuable information anyone who loves plants can have. Whether you live in an apartment, a house with a backyard, a farm, or just have a little corner with two pots on the windowsill, the space doesn't matter, the plant doesn't matter. What matters is the technique, and it is simpler than you might imagine. The idea is this: you take a branch from any plant you already have, one that a neighbor has or one growing on the street, and you transform that branch into a new, complete rooted plant, ready to grow and produce. No seeds, no store-bought seedlings, no cost at all. And the result isn't just any plant, it is a perfect clone of the original plant, with the exact same flavor, size, vigor, and productivity. Science calls this process propagation by cuttings, and 70% of the seedlings sold in Brazilian nurseries are produced exactly like this. Embrapa documents this, agronomists teach this, and nursery owners charge a premium precisely because most people still don't know they can do the same thing at home. Think about how much you have spent over the years buying seedlings. Now think about how every plant you own today could have turned into 30, 50, or 80 new plants from a single pruning. Every branch you threw in the trash was a potential seedling. It was a new rose bush, a guava tree, a lemon tree, an acerola, an ornamental plant, a medicinal herb. All of this discarded without knowing what you held in your hands. And the best part is that the process doesn't require a large space, expensive equipment, or advanced technical knowledge. A PET bottle, a glass of water, some sand, a little aloe vera gel, and you already have everything you need to start today. Those who live in apartments can do it in pots. Those with a balcony can do it on the balcony. Those with a backyard can multiply them at scale. The technique adapts to any reality, any budget, and any experience level. In this video, you will learn from the very beginning how to choose the right branch, because not every branch roots the same way. How do you prepare this branch before planting? Because proper preparation is what separates those who succeed from those who give up, thinking it's impossible. What are the best rooting methods? From the simplest one, using water, to more comprehensive techniques that speed up the process surprisingly well. How do you create the ideal environment even indoors? And how do you know, without pulling anything out, when the roots have formed and the plant is ready to grow on its own? This information has real value. Family farmers in the Brazilian countryside have known this for generations. Rural producers use this technique to save thousands of reais a year on replanting. And now you will learn it too, clearly, from scratch, with no fluff. Stay until the end, because every part of this video contains a detail that makes a difference when it's time to get your hands dirty. Before anything else, before grabbing the pruning shears, before preparing the substrate, before thinking about rooting hormones, there is a decision that most people completely ignore, which determines whether the cutting will sprout in 2 weeks or rot in 3 days. Choosing the right branch, not just any branch, will do. Understanding this is not a minor detail. It is the foundation of everything. The branch you are going to cut needs to be at the right stage of maturity, and this stage has a name: semi-hardwood. It is the branch that is no longer soft like a young shoot, that light green one that bends too easily, but it is also not the old darkened branch that has already hardened like wood. It is the branch in the middle, with 2 to 8 months of growth, firm, but still with active life circulating inside. This branch has the right amount of carbohydrates to feed itself during rooting, and the right amount of active meristematic cells to form roots quickly. Size also matters. Between 15 and 30 centimeters is the ideal range for most species. Too short, and the cutting won't have enough energy reserves to sustain the process until the roots appear. Too long, and the branch loses water faster than it can compensate, wilting before it roots. Within this length, you need to ensure there are at least 2 visible nodes on the part that will be buried. Nodes are those slightly protruding points on the stem where leaves emerge, And it is exactly at these points that roots emerge. Now comes a detail that few people mention. Never use a branch that has flowers or fruit. When the plant is flowering or fruiting, all its metabolic energy is directed toward reproduction. There is nothing left to form roots. The cutting will look healthy for a few days and then simply wither away. If the chosen branch has a flower bud, remove it completely before cutting. If it is loaded with fruit, choose another branch that is not in the productive phase. The cutting tool needs to be sharp and clean. Rusty or dirt-covered shears tear the plant tissue instead of cutting it, and this tear becomes a gateway for fungi and bacteria that kill the cutting before it even has a chance to root. Wipe the blade with rubbing alcohol, let it dry, and make the cut in a single firm motion. The angle of the cut should be diagonal, around 45 degrees. This angle is not aesthetic, it is functional. It increases the contact area between the inner tissue of the stem and the substrate, and it prevents water from pooling on top of the cut and rotting the base. Right after cutting, remove all the leaves from the bottom 2/3 of the cutting, the part that will be buried or submerged. Leaves below the substrate line rot and release compounds that inhibit rooting. On the top third, keep only 1 or 2 leaves. They are responsible for continuing photosynthesis and producing the sugars that feed root formation. Removing all the leaves is a common mistake that deprives the cutting of fuel. Leaving too many leaves is another mistake that drains water in amounts that the rootless cutting cannot yet replace. If the species is woody, like a fig, pomegranate, or grapevine, there is an extra step that greatly accelerates the process. With the tip of a knife, lightly scrape the bark on the bottom 2 centimeters of the cutting's base, exposing a strip of the light green tissue underneath. This tissue is the cambium, the most active layer of the stem, where cells divide the fastest. Exposing the cambium multiplies the root emission points and significantly reduces the rooting time in species that usually take longer. With the prepared branch in hand, the part that most divides opinions among plant growers begins. What is the best medium for rooting? The honest answer is that it depends on the species and your goal, because each method has real advantages in situations where it works better than the others. The most accessible and visual method of all is water rooting. You place the base of the cutting in a glass of clean water, leave the lower nodes submerged, and wait. Simple as that. The great advantage of this method is that you can monitor root development in real time without having to move anything to check. It works very well for indoor plants like pothos, philodendrons, impatiens, begonias, and most aromatic herbs like basil and mint. The glass needs to be dark-colored or covered with paper to block the light, because developing roots react negatively to direct light exposure. Change the water every 2 or 3 days to prevent bacterial growth. A trick that remarkably speeds up this method is adding a little 3% hydrogen peroxide, 10 volume, to the water in the glass. The extra oxygen stimulates cellular activity at the base of the cutting and reduces rooting time by up to 40% in some species. Rooting in a solid substrate is preferred by professional growers and works best for fruit trees, shrubs, and woody plants. The ideal substrate is not regular garden soil. Regular soil compacts becomes waterlogged and suffocates the developing roots. The best material is pure coarse construction sand or mixed in equal parts with perlite or vermiculite. This mixture drains excess water and maintains constant aeration around the base of the cutting, which is exactly what the cells need to differentiate into roots. Do not add any fertilizer at this stage. Without roots, the plant cannot absorb nutrients. Excess fertilizer at this point will burn the base of the cutting instead of helping. The secret that transforms the result of substrate rooting is creating a humid microclimate around the cutting. Take a clear PET bottle, cut it in half, and invert the top part over the pot like a lid. This creates a high humidity chamber that drastically reduces water loss through the leaves, compensating for the lack of roots to replenish moisture. Open this lid for 5 minutes a day to ventilate and prevent fungal buildup. Keep it in a place with indirect light, never direct sun on the plastic, because the greenhouse effect inside the bottle can reach temperatures that will kill the cutting in hours. The third method is the one that has surprised the most people in recent years, and it is completely free. Aloe vera gel, the common aloe vera that grows in any pot or garden bed, contains natural plant auxins, the same hormones that synthetic rooting powders sold in stores use as their active ingredient. Furthermore, the gel has antibacterial and antifungal properties that protect the cut of the cutting during the most vulnerable period of the process. To use it, cut an aloe vera leaf, extract the gel directly, and dip the base of the cutting in it for 30 minutes before planting it in the substrate. Comparative studies conducted at Brazilian universities have shown that cuttings treated with aloe vera gel had rooting rates similar to those treated with synthetic hormones in tropical species, with an average time of 15 to 20 days for the first roots to form. There is one argument that ends any debate about whether it is worth learning how to propagate by cuttings. A plant grown from the seed of a common guava tree takes between 3 and 4 years to produce its first fruits. A seedling produced by a cutting from the same guava tree starts producing between 8 and 12 months after rooting. This is not a salesman's promise. It is documented plant physiology. The plant originating from a branch is already born an adult in metabolic terms, because it is literally a continuation of the organism that originated it. But the advantage of the clone goes beyond speed. When you harvest fruits from a plant and are impressed by the flavor, the size, the extraordinary productivity, and decide to plant the seeds of that fruit, what grows can be completely different. Sexual reproduction mixes genes, and the result is unpredictable. On the other hand, a cutting taken from that same plant produces a genetically identical organism with exactly the same characteristics that sparked your admiration. Producers of specialty coffee, wine grapes, and fine olive oil all propagate exclusively by cuttings or grafting for precisely this reason: total control over the quality of what will grow. For those who live in apartments or have limited space, propagating cuttings in pots is completely viable and works very well. Pots with a 30 centimeter diameter are enough to root and grow most species until their final transplant. Place the pot near a window with good indirect light. Maintain the moisture of the substrate with a spray bottle instead of a watering can to avoid waterlogging, and use the PET bottle as a greenhouse. Plants like rosemary, thyme, basil, mint, begonias, roses, philodendrons, and dozens of ornamental species root perfectly under these conditions without needing a backyard. Those with more space can work on a real scale. Styrofoam trays or wooden boxes with sand allow you to root 50 or 100 cuttings at the same time. A spring pruning on an adult guava tree can provide between 40 and 70 usable branches. If only half of them root successfully, you have between 20 and 35 new, ready-to-go seedlings that are worth between $20 and $50 each at the nursery. In a single pruning on a single plant, you have saved or generated a value that can reach over $1,000. Multiplied by all the plants you have and all the prunings of the year, the number becomes impossible to ignore. The time of year also factors into this equation. Spring is the golden period for cuttings in most Brazilian regions. The mild temperatures and the increase in daylight hours trigger the natural production of auxins in plants, and cellular metabolism is at its peak. Cuttings taken in early spring root faster, with a higher success rate, and the resulting seedlings reach summer already established and ready to grow vigorously. In winter, especially in colder regions, the process slows down significantly and the failure rate increases, except for tropical species adapted to constant heat. The roots have appeared, and now is the moment when many people celebrate too early and make the mistake that undoes everything they have achieved. The rooted seedling is strong in potential, but still fragile in structure. The newly formed roots are thin, white, and sensitive to any sudden changes in light, temperature, or humidity. Before any transplanting, before any exposure to direct sun, there is a process that agronomists call acclimatization, and it determines whether this seedling will thrive or wither in its first few days. Start by removing the PET bottle greenhouse for increasingly longer periods. First 1 hour a day, then 2, then the whole morning. Over the course of 1 or 2 weeks, the plant will gradually adapt to the ambient air humidity without suffering water shock. After this stage, begin exposing it to sunlight progressively. First filtered shade, then morning sun, which is gentler, and only then full sun if the species requires it. This process is not optional. A seedling taken straight from the humid greenhouse into the afternoon sun will wilt in hours, even with healthy roots, because the system has not yet developed the necessary leaf structure to withstand the intense transpiration that the sun demands. The rooting substrate, that sand or vermiculite with no nutrients, was perfect for forming roots, but it will not sustain the plant's growth for long. After the final transplant, use a rich substrate with organic compost, aged manure, or worm castings. Only add fertilizer after transplanting when the roots are already established and the plant is already showing active growth with new leaves emerging. Before that, fertilizer burns more than it helps. Watering in the first few months after rooting should be frequent but moderate. The root system is still young and not very extensive. The plant tolerates neither prolonged drought nor waterlogging. The practical tip is to insert your finger too similarly into the substrate. If it is still moist, wait. If it is dry, water it. Simple as that, without relying on a fixed schedule. Now comes the set of extra information that most videos don't mention. Rooting is just the beginning of a practice that can completely transform your relationship with plants. Once you master the basic technique, you start seeing every plant differently. Every pruning stops being waste and becomes an opportunity. Every fallen branch becomes raw material. Neighbors with beautiful plants become sources of material. Farmers markets, where you ask for a branch of something you admire, become a free genetic bank. There is also the practice of air layering, which is the ideal method for species that are harder to root through conventional cuttings, such as mango, jackfruit, and some citrus varieties. In air layering, you do not cut the branch before it roots. You make a ring cut in the bark of the branch while it is still attached to the mother plant. You wrap that area with moist sphagnum moss or vermiculite. You cover it with clear plastic and tie the ends. The roots grow inside this wrapping while the branch continues to be fed by the mother plant. After 3 to 6 weeks, when the white roots have filled the plastic, you cut the branch below them and you have a large established seedling that never went through water stress because it was never without a water source. The success rate of air layering in difficult species reaches 90% when executed well. Another point worth noting is the issue of seasonality when choosing the mother plant. The same plant will offer branches with very different rooting potential depending on the season. In spring, when the plant has an accelerated metabolism, the branches are loaded with auxins and carbohydrates. In winter, those same branches might have half the rooting potential. Learn to observe your plant. If it is sprouting vigorously, putting out new leaves and growing, that is the time to collect cuttings. If it is dormant with no visible movement, wait. At the end of all this, what remains is a simple certainty. The knowledge of rooting plants from branches is not an agronomist's technique or a nursery owner's secret. It is the knowledge of people who respect the earth and understand that nature already offers everything it needs to multiply. You don't need money. You don't need a large space. You don't need expensive products. You need attention, patience, and an understanding of what is happening inside that branch you planted. And now you know, the next time you go to buy a seedling, stop. Look at the plant you already have, grab a pair of pruning shears and begin. If this knowledge has transformed the way you look at the branches in your garden, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. We are revealing the secrets of nature that many try to hide. Let's cultivate the future together. The next green treasure will be open soon.